One of the most common questions I get from dealers when I'm speaking at events or doing webinars has to do with measuring how either the dealership is doing as a whole or how a particular department in the dealership is doing compared to other dealers. A couple of years ago, I'd finished a program in the morning for a regional boot camp and had sat down for lunch at a table with a group of the dealers that had been a part of the program. During my portion, I'd been talking about the importance of not only knowing the key numbers by department in the dealerships, but also how those numbers compare with dealerships who are hitting it out of the park in service, parts, and sales. I had several of the dealers talking about their dealership and how they were doing and what they were committed to doing when they got back to their dealerships the following day. Dennis, one of the dealers who had been quiet, listening to what the others were saying, finally spoke up and said, "I just don't understand how you can get the numbers out of a shop that you say you can. In all my years in owning a dealership, I've never even gotten close to what you said this morning. I'm at a point that I've given up and just accepted that my shop will never be anything more than a convenience for my whole goods customers." At that moment, when Dennis had finished, all the eyes at the table moved from Dennis to me, each waiting to find out what I was going to say. I've learned over the years that the best way to lead a person to a new mental position is not to talk, but to ask questions. So I first agreed with Dennis and let him know that most of the dealers in our dealer success groups we work with or who had attended our boot camps felt the same way about their service departments. But they discovered with just a few minor changes, their service departments began making the money. Then I asked him to share with me what he felt the biggest roadblock in his shop was that prevented it from being profitable. Without hesitation, Dennis said, "It's my people. They just won't do what I ask them to do." I then asked, "All of your people or some of your people?" He said, "Well, my service manager tells me that he can't get the guys to clock in and clock out of work orders." I said, "That's interesting. Does your parts manager make sure that your parts people charge customers for the parts that they sell them?" Dennis said, "Sure." "Does your salespeople charge your customers for all the equipment they sell or just for what they want to charge them for?" Again, Dennis said, "Sure, and I see where you're going with this." I smiled and then asked, "If you require your parts manager and your sales manager to be responsible for their people and their inventory, why are you not holding your service manager to the same level of accountability?" Dennis laughed and said, "Well, it's hard to find a service manager." I told Dennis that I wasn't saying he needed to get rid of his service manager, just to hold him accountable. Right now, he's not accountable for anything because he's convinced you that what you've been asking of him is impossible, and it's not. A service department buys and sells time, no different than a parts department buys and sells parts, or a sales department buys and sells equipment. If you're like the average dealership we work with, your service manager is likely only billing out 60% of the time that you're buying, and he or she is complaining that they're falling behind and they need more techs. More techs are not the solution. The solution is uncovering what is happening to the 40% of the time that's not being accounted for and fixing that. Dennis, I said, I want you to do both yourself and me a favor. I need you to run a labor report from your software for last week. From that report, I want you to take the time you've paid the techs to work, 8 hours a day, and compare that to the amount of time that they were turning a wrench on work orders for that last week. Take the hours they were clocked onto work orders for the week and divide it by the hours you paid them to be at work. That will give you your recovery rate for the week. Next, I want you to let your service manager know that you would like to spend a couple of days next week in the shop just to get a sense of the challenges that they're having firsthand. At the end of the second day that you were in the shop, again run a labor report for those 2 days and compare your recovery. I will guarantee it will have improved. I feel confident that you'll find your problem has to do with your service manager's style of management more than your service tech's ability to push out more work. Lack of good management has more to do with shop productivity and profitability than anything else. We finished lunch and Dennis promised me he would do as I'd ask him to do. That was over 3 years ago. Dennis now has a shop that is profitable. They're turning out quality work and keeping their turnaround times for customers to the lowest that they've ever been. Dennis and I started working together a few months after that lunch we had. I coached Dennis on how to help his service manager grow in his management skills and work with him to improve their service processes. Whether it's service, parts, or sales, everything has a number attached to it. Once you understand the numbers and how to impact them, every part of your dealership begins to work and throw off the profit that you're striving hard to attain. If you're ready to move your dealership and your team to the next level, I would encourage you to let us walk beside you with either our management bootcamp or our dealer success groups. Nothing changes unless you're willing to try something different. Make this the year you make the change.